subject because culture is a very difficult term to define. So is development. It is by both micro and macro. We talk about culture at a personal level. He's a very cultured person, we say. Only a little while ago, my friend Mr. Ramarao was asking me, why do they say blood culture? That's a very interesting question because what it contains, culture is an aggregate of several components, and development also is a very vague concept. I have chosen to speak on this, and as your stamina is definitely much less than my stamina to speak, your stamina to hear, I would, with your permission, divide it into two parts. It is a very huge subject, and I have done my homework. I must really thank Dr. Vijay Kumar and Sri Rangarajan. I must really thank them because they have given me an opportunity to learn, to read, and to do some homework. This is an excellent experience, and the preparation I have been making on this is entirely due to their very kind initiative and support. You will all agree with me that the term culture, especially yesterday when we watched the proceedings of Indian Parliament, many people raised a question, what is the political culture like? What is the culture of each party was accusing the other party of cheating the nation. Now this reflects on India's political culture. I want to come to that. I shall proceed briefly without going into the social science encyclopedia about definition, that culture broadly means the totality of ideas, values, customs, and achievements of a society of people. Dr. Fitz says that if a society is taken to be an aggregate of social relations, then culture is the content of those relations. Society emphasizes the human component, the aggregate of people and the relations between them. Culture emphasizes the component of accumulated resources, immaterial as well as material, which the people inherit, employ, transmute, add, and transmit. This is a very useful definition given by an authority on the subject. We imbibe certain values, certain ideas. We transmute and transmit them to the next generation. That is why in marriages, for instance, we say, what is that culture? What is that cultural background? What is that background? What is that family background? We make very sweeping generalizations about people. But then please remember, all societies seek knowledge and wealth right from the beginning. But then knowledge and wealth do not add stability to society. They add strength. They add power. But they don't necessarily add stability to society. This is where, this is where a very important point is that knowledge and wealth are sought after, but they do not necessarily contribute to social well-being or social good. They are necessary, but they are not vital. Culture is vital. Culture is greater than knowledge. Culture is greater than wealth. As it is rightly said, culture is a shock absorber. at an individual level, at a family level, at a town level, at a local level, and at the national level. It's a shock absorber. Culture is influenced by geography, climate, natural factors, and as somebody said, culture is the mother, institutions are its children. This is a very beautiful quotation. Culture is the mother, institutions are its children. In this context, I will go back and forth. I have done my homework to present to you because it's a very dangerous subject. As I said in the beginning, I'm too small to talk about it with any authority. Therefore, what I have done is to depend upon authorities, including modern authorities, a brilliant chapter from Amartya Sen. Thanks to Mr. Varahal Jetty, he made me speak on that about 2 years ago, Argumentative Tradition. There is a brilliant chapter by Amartya Sen. Of course, there are some limitations of Amartya Sen's book. Ramachandra Guha points out many limitations. Please remember, all lectures, all books, all publications are always vulnerable to criticism. There is no literature without criticism. There is no lecture without criticism. There is no argument without dissent. There is no debate without dissent. Yesterday in Indian Parliament, we saw more dissent and less debate. That's the beauty of it. Normally, there is more debate and less dissent. Dissent is essential. In America, there is a journal called Dissent. It's a beautiful journal. Its purpose is to disagree. It is organized. Dissent is a very good journal. So, yesterday, while dissent was there, debate was less. Now, dissent and debate, discussion go together. Now, ancient civilizations like Greek, Chinese, and Indian civilizations bestowed considerable thought in setting goals for individuals and society. According to ancient Indian thought, I am quoting from the scriptures, government exists to serve society and society exists to serve the individual. This is a beautiful quotation. Government exists to serve society and society exists to serve the individual. The Greeks also held the same kind of position, stance. According to ancient Greeks, there was no conflict between the ideals of the individual and those of the society. Necessarily, I refer to the Ramayana and the Mahabharata because they existed earlier than what we get from Greek experience, Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato. There is an interesting convergence of ideas, which I once mentioned. I shall try to refer to that shortly. The Ramayana, for instance, is a story of, forget about the historical part of it, accuracy or authenticity part of it. Essentially, it's a story of love, service, and sacrifice. Love, service, sacrifice, renunciation. Mr. K. Subramaniam, one of the finest analysts on strategy, who died last year, he wrote a beautiful piece on the difference between renunciation and sacrifice. What is the difference? It's a very simple thing. Subramaniam is a nuclear authority on nuclear science, India's strategic affairs, foreign policy, and he wrote a beautiful piece on the difference between renunciation and sacrifice. Sacrifice, in chess, you sacrifice the bishop to get the queen or the king. You make sacrifice we make sometimes to get a higher gain. Renunciation is something different. Rama renounced. It was not a sacrifice. Bharata made a sacrifice. But then Bharata did not expect anything in return. So the Ramayana is essentially a story where, that is why Mahatma Gandhi said, the greatest epic for me is the Ramayana. Nothing is greater than Ramayana. He wrote a beautiful book called The Efficacy of Ramanama. I think it's extinct. It's a small volume, Efficacy of Ramanama. Because why Mahatma Gandhi was so fond of Rama was the simple fact that Rama was a giver and Gandhi was a giver. And I told you several times that Gandhiji was very, very humorous about Andhras. But then in the case of Kasinath Nageshwar Rao, he used a biblical expression borrowing from inspiration from the Ramayana. He said, Kasinath Nageshwar Rao is really Visudatha, whereas other Andhra titles I don't accept. There are too many Andhra titles, I don't accept them. Deshabhakta, Deshodharaka, etc., etc., etc. But in the case of Kasinath Nageshwar Rao, I accept this because one line, Gandhiji's English was biblical, so was Rajaji's. He is never so happy as when he is giving. What a beautiful line. He is never so happy as when he is giving. So similarly, Ramayana Rama was never so happy, whether it was his kingdom, whether it was anything for that matter. No. The Ramayana, for instance, what to do, and some people say, I'm not an expert on these epics, some people say Mahabharata, what not to do. What you should not do, the Mahabharata teaches. What you should do, the Ramayana teaches. And so the ancient epics, for that matter, focused on human values. And so from there we move on to ancient Greece. There is an interesting convergence. There is an argument. That is why even Radhakrishnan said, in India, two dangers are there. There are some people who say everything that happened in ancient India was great, excellent. The other extreme, people say everything that happened in ancient India was rotten, was wrong. Therefore, two extreme positions are taken. Ancient Greece, for that matter, we start normally with the sophists, followed by Socrates. The only thing I know is I know nothing, the paradox. When young people went to him in quest of knowledge, he said, I don't know anything. The only thing I know is I know nothing, a paradox. From paradox began the spirit of inquiry. And as it is very rightly said, paradox is such an interesting thing. A philosopher very subtly interpreted Socrates' paradox. The only thing I know is I know nothing. It's a paradox. From paradox came philosophy, from philosophy came science. That is why one writer said, paradox is to philosophy what feeling is to love. There is no love without feeling. There is no philosophy, there is no science, there is no spirit of inquiry without paradox. And the father of paradox was Socrates. Not only was he father of paradox, when an opportunity was given, when death sentence was passed against him, and when that evening people went to him and said, sir, they showed the door out of that prison and said, sir, please save your life for the sake of posterity, for the sake of society. He said, no, nothing doing. He accepted death voluntarily and gladly. So what Socrates did at that time, his disciple Plato was so overpowered, overwhelmed by the tragedy, distressed by it, that Plato immediately wanted to create something unique, something extraordinary. Plato became a communist. He said, the root of all problems is selfishness. Selfishness starts because of two reasons, he said. Either because of family interest or because of lure of power and wealth. Therefore, he said, rulers should have neither family nor wealth. He made all rulers sannyasis. They will live in barracks, open barracks, away from families and away from wealth. No power. They are sannyasis literally. And that was the communism created by Plato. And Plato, please believe me, Plato created this communism. The first communist thinker in human history, Plato. He created this. And Plato, very interestingly, somebody asked him a question, sir, what is the greatest virtue? Look at the debate. What is the greatest virtue? He said, knowledge is the greatest virtue. He was young. All of us, ladies, no ladies here, gentlemen, all of us know that our ideas, our attitudes also keep changing with the passage of time. We are not what we were 20 years ago, for that matter. Therefore, with age also, we get more mature, more balanced, and perhaps a little different, conservative, whatever it is. So Plato said, knowledge is the highest virtue. Then he realized, he grew old. Then he realized, so many knowledgeable people are there in ancient Athens, but Athens is not the most virtuous society. Therefore, something higher is there, higher than knowledge. What is that virtue? Then he made a famous statement which Sir Ernest Barker brilliantly translated. No virtue is so virtuous as the virtue of self-restraint. Atmanigraha. Now, did the Upanishads influence Plato? That's a question. Please remember, before Plato, Indian seers were talking about these important things like Atmanigraha. Therefore, did it go from India? Did it travel? We don't know. There is no historical evidence. That apart, there was a convergence of idea as far as Indian civilization and Greek civilization were concerned, that no virtue is so virtuous as the virtue of self-restraint. So Plato, Sishya was Aristotle. Aristotle was a genius. And as one writer very rightly interpreted, Plato started from the ideal and came to the actual. Aristotle started from the actual, came to the ideal. That's a beautiful difference. In politics, we always start with the worst case situation. I have been a student of politics. All students of politics, we always start with the worst happening. Worst happening, Andhra Pradesh will become 4. We start with that. And finally come to the practical situation, Andhra Pradesh will survive like this. Best happening, Andhra Pradesh will remain united. That's the last. The last option is the best. So we start with the worst and come to the best. In management, they start with the best, especially marketing. They start with the best and descend down to the worst. Worst happening. That's the difference between politics and management. Now, therefore, please remember, Plato started with the ideal and came to the actual. He realized that it was impossible to keep people virtuous. Therefore, came to the... Aristotle started with the actual and ascended to the ideal. My ideal society. Moderation, balance, middle class being strong, etc., etc. This is the difference between Plato and Aristotle. All of us know Aristotle was such a brilliant man. He knew everything. He was the founder of a system of lecturing called peripatetic school. Peripatetic means you lecture while you walk. Our RVR Chandrasekhar Rao Garu is always very fond of lecturing while walking. That is why Varhal Chetty is always angry with him, because he never goes near the microphone. The microphone is away. And therefore, he is very fond of lecturing while talking. Aristotle did it. And Aristotle taught Alexander 2 wonderful lessons. Lesson number 1, when you go on invasions, please carry an atlas with you. Lesson number 2, whichever country you invade, know about its local technology and make use of it. This is the lesson that Aristotle gave to Alexander. These were the... Anyway, after Aristotle and Plato, the ideal and the actual, I jumped to Swami Vivekananda. Look at this parallel. Swami Vivekananda summed up ancient Indian thought and said, ancient India sought to harmonize the ideal with the life and to elevate life to the ideal. What a beautiful quotation. See, Aristotelian wisdom, according to Vivekananda, had existed in India prior to Aristotle. Ancient India sought to harmonize the ideal with life and to elevate life to the ideal. Ultimately, we elevate our lives to the ideal. That is the ascent of man, with Aurobindo foresaw. Now, extolling the uniqueness of Indian culture, Vivekananda said, no country in the world has done so much for the improvement of the human mind as India has done. Culture withstands shocks, not knowledge. Culture levels of social inequality. These are the words of Swami Vivekananda. These are very famous, stirring words. Culture levels of social inequality. That is why Nehru, another agnostic, I am quoting Amartya Sen and Nehru today, 2 agnostics. Nehru says, Swami Vivekananda, I am quoting Jawaharlal Nehru, gave us something which brings us a certain pride in our inheritance. Something of the vigor of the old Indian thought dressed in modern garb. What a beautiful expression. Old Indian thought dressed in modern garb. Now that is why when Swami Vivekananda arrived, it was the arrival of the modern prophet of India. That's what they said. Now, if that is the, what here in this context, I must also, Swami Swahananda wrote the life of Ramakrishna, in which Vivekananda's words he quotes. That was a another fascinating line. He says, India's contribution to human thought, to the progress of human thought, to the progress of culture, has been silent, profound, and everlasting. And he says, and Vivekananda compares it, like the morning dew that falls unseen and unheard, but brings into blossom the fairest of roses. What beautiful poetry, the language of Vivekananda. Like the morning dew that falls unseen and unheard. We can't hear the noise of dew fall. We can't see the dew fall. Like the morning dew that falls unseen and unheard, but brings into blossom the fairest of roses. This is what Swami Vivekananda said about Indian thought. And therefore, Vivekananda, the greatness of Vivekananda is, he transcended the barriers to which Amartya Sen makes a particular reference. The barriers of region, religion, caste, etc. He says, a stirring line from Swami Vivekananda, feel like Christ, you will be Christ. Feel like Buddha, you will be Buddha. It's only a feeling. If you think you are Christ, you are Christ. If you feel like Buddha, you are a Buddha. That means there is no difference between Buddha, Christ, Rama and Krishna, according to Vivekananda. A lesson he learned from his master, Sri Ramakrishna. Therefore, this is about it. Now, the confluence, for instance, here I would like to go to Jawaharlal Nehru. What a beautiful summing up he does of Indian culture tradition. What is Indian culture? What is tradition? Nehru was not a believer, but Nehru understood the impact of religion. He said famously, Indian tradition, Indian culture have been impacted by 4 great religions. 2 religions that came from within and 2 religions that came from outside. Hinduism from within gave tolerance. Buddhism that came from within, compassion. Christianity that came first from outside, 52 AD, St. Thomas gave us service and charity. And Islam that followed, social equality. We can add Sikhism and say spirit of sacrifice. So all religions, the positive side of religions, Nehru understood, and he summed up the essence of Indian culture and tradition as this. Now, this is why I think you look at the sequence of events. We are now celebrating the 150th birth anniversary next year of Swami Vivekananda. Tagore's 150th birth anniversary. Vivekananda's. Then came Gandhi. Then came Aurobindo. I mentioned all these things earlier. I don't want to repeat. But then Amartya Sen takes a different route altogether. The same subject in his argumentative tradition. He says, look at the way Sen describes Indian culture. India is an immensely diverse country. Amartya Sen's usage of words is impeccable. No word extra. Look at the language of Sen. India is an immensely diverse country with many distinct pursuits, vastly disparate convictions, widely divergent customs, and a veritable feast of viewpoints. A veritable feast of viewpoints. He says that it was India where, what is the meaning of civilization and culture? According to Amartya Sen, reasoning. It is only the argumentative tradition of India that made India famous. And he goes to Buddhist councils, and how Ashoka, in his opinion, 2 greatest emperors of all time. One was Ashoka, the other was Akbar. Why he says these 2 were the greatest emperors? For the simple reason that they held reasoning as the key to human progress. The argumentative tradition that India developed, according to Sen, crossed the barriers of caste, class, gender, and religion. Not many of us know that women took a very active part in discussions Amartya Sen gives the examples of Garge and others, how women took part in discussions. For that matter, even in the Ramayana, not many people realize that in the Ramayana, there were occasions when Sita disagrees with Rama and says, no, you should not do it, you should not have done it. But then, the relationship between husband and wife there is what Amartya Sen would call the relationship of two different points of view presented by husband and wife. Why are you doing this? Why are you killing? Why are you embarking on this mission? And then gets the answer, explanation from the husband. The wife has the right to ask, the husband has the duty to explain. That was there in the Ramayana. Now this is how Amartya Sen says, for instance, the focus, according to Sen, is in the long history of the argumentative tradition beginning with Buddhist councils. Secondly, its contemporary relevance. How culture is shaped by arguments, by debates, by discussions, etc. Thirdly, its relative neglect in the ongoing cultural discussion. This is what Amartya Sen says made India famous. Esteemed friends, very unsurprisingly rather, Bertrand Russell, Aldous Huxley, and Arnold Toynbee, in the 50s they said, I am quoting them, India is the only country that can show the world a way out of darkness. The only country that can show the world a way out of darkness. What is the darkness they are referring to? They are referring to the two devastating wars, the First and the Second World Wars, which killed nearly 7 to 8 crores of people and destroyed so much of property. Never again, people said, the First World War and the Second World War, horrendous wars. After the wars came the Cold War. And during the Cold War, there was enormous growth in nuclear weapons. And that is why Bertrand Russell, Arnold Toynbee, and Aldous Huxley, 3 great minds, they said, India is the only country that can show us the way out of darkness. Now, illustrative of this culture, we are in 2011, we are coming tomorrow to the last day of the year 2011. Exactly 100 years ago, Madho Singh of Jaipur, the ruler of Jaipur, presented this. It was a column, Stambha undi, Rashtrapati Bhavanlo, appudu Viceroy's palace lo. Presented these 4 lines, they were inscribed on the column. That is the Indian culture. He says, in thought, faith, in word, wisdom, in deed, courage, in life, service, so may India be great. Exactly 100 years ago, these were the 4 lines inscribed on, it's still there in Rashtrapati Bhavan, that column. In thought, faith, in word, wisdom, in deed, courage, in life, service, so may India be great. Now therefore, Galbraith, who was ambassador to India, he says the peculiarity of Indian culture is, it is a culture of contentment. Galbraith was really surprised that in the midst of so much of poverty, Indian people appeared contented. They were not complaining. The culture of contentment, he says, a good society must be at peace with itself and the world at large. And creating a culture of ideas depends upon innovativeness, education, etc., etc. Now, let us briefly digress for that matter. Language and literature impact culture. I just want to digress for a moment to a very interesting. In 1961, P.V. Rajmannar delivered a stirring convocation oration in Andhra University. 1961. Andhra University convocation orations were brought out in a book form by Dr. Gopalakrishna Reddy and Ramesh Satta. Earlier also they were brought out, C.R. Reddy's essays and addresses by Professor K.R. Srinivasa Iyengar. And that's a wonderful publication. Rajmannar spoke in English. I once mentioned to it, pardon my repetition, a teacher is given 2 licenses. The license to repeat and the license to oversimplify or exaggerate. 2 licenses are given. And therefore, Rajamanar, I'm just repeating, he was a scholar, a great judge, a scholar in Telugu and English. And the only misfortune was C.R. Reddy was not there. C.R. Reddy was a scholar in Telugu and English. Reddy garu Telugulo mari inka was a great orator and authority in Telugu language. And not many people know that Andhra University, one of the important conditions on which Andhra University was founded was the fulfillment of a requirement that Telugu culture, Telugu language would be promoted. And one of the first things that Andhra University did was, if the first convocation oration was given by Radhakrishnan, if the second convocation oration was given by C.V. Raman, if the first honorary doctorate degree was ever awarded to Radhakrishnan in 1928 when Raman was the convocation orator. In 1932, when Radhakrishnan became the Vice Chancellor, he gave a prize jointly, an award jointly, 1,500 rupees to Visakha Satyanarayana garu and Adi Bapiraj garu. And they were, Visakha Satyanarayana garu appudu famous మాట అన్నారన్నమాట. ఆంధ్ర యూనివర్సిటీ వాళ్ళకి ఆయనే అనగలరన్నమాట. ఆంధ్ర యూనివర్సిటీ వాళ్ళకి ఎంత అహంభావం, ఎంత ధైర్యం, నాతో పాటు ఇంకొకటి కలిపి ప్రైజ్ ఇస్తారా అని అక్కడ చక్కటి మాట అన్నారు. చదువుకున్నాడు, మా బాపిరాజు బావు కాబట్టి ఒప్పుకున్నాను అన్నాడు. సో that beautiful oration that he delivered 1961, I'm very fond of it. Although I'm not quoting the verbatim, he said, what a beautiful situation Andhra University. On one side, the sea, on the other side, the mountain. The sea, an emblem of a restless symbol of adventure, dynamism, change, roaring all the time. The mountain, symbols of permanence, tradition, and values. Between the silent mountain and the roaring sea, the university is located. It's a dialectical process, he said. Unfortunately,